All right, let's plunge headfirst into this fascinating, sometimes kind of unsettling world where transhumanism bumps up against religious fundamentalism.
Yeah, it's a real head scratcher.
We're going deep into the sources you gave us to really dissect this clash of, well, I guess you could call them ideologies.
Exactly.
Can these two wildly different worldviews even coexist?
That's the million-dollar question.
And should they even bother trying? We'll tackle those tough questions head on.
We'll be looking at some really specific points of tension.
Oh, yeah, like life extension.
Artificial intelligence.
And even what it means to be human in this whole crazy mix.
It's a clash that goes way beyond just philosophical armchair debates.
Oh, absolutely.
It's playing out right now in the real world with actual conflicts.
Over cutting-edge technologies and what they mean for the future of, well, us.
The future of humanity.
Okay, so before we go full-on sci-fi, let's break down the basics.
Sounds good.
Starting with transhumanism, but instead of just, skimming the surface,
Right.
let's grab a concrete example from our sources.
Okay.
How about radical life extension? What do our sources say about that?
Well, transhumanists basically see aging as a problem.
A problem to be solved.
Exactly. And they're not talking about just tacking on a few extra years here.
Oh, no.
They're talking about living indefinitely,
Whoa.
using advanced biotechnologies.
That's wild.
Our sources highlight Aubrey de Grey's work
Yeah, I've heard of them.
on this thing called Strategies for Engineered Negligible Senescence,
Catchy name.
SENS for short.
Ah, okay.
And the goal is to actually repair the damage that builds up in our cells over time.
Like a cellular tune-up.
Exactly. Essentially hitting the pause button on aging.
So living to be 200, 500, even 1,000 years old.
There's a real possibility in their minds.
That's mind-blowing. Talk about a game changer.
Yeah.
But how do religious fundamentalists view this quest for immortality? I mean, it
Yeah.
seems like it's going directly against traditional ideas about life and death, the natural order of things.
It definitely challenges those ideas.
Yeah,
But we have to remember that religious fundamentalism is a big umbrella.
right. Not a monolithic thing.
Exactly. It covers a wide range of beliefs.
So many different groups.
Yeah. So let's look at one specific example from our sources. How about the Catholic Church's stance on this?
That's a good one.
The Church is generally supportive of medical advancements, you know.
Especially those that alleviate suffering.
Right, but they draw a pretty hard line when it comes to interventions that aim to conquer death.
They're not on board with that.
Not really. They see death as an intrinsic part of the human experience
A natural part of life.
and a transition to eternal life, so try to postpone it indefinitely.
That's a no-no.
They see it as interfering with God's plan.
Okay, so that's a pretty stark contrast.
Yeah, two very different perspectives.
One side sees death as the enemy, something to be conquered.
And the other sees it as inevitable, even sacred.
It sounds like we're dealing with a fundamental disagreement about the very nature of human existence.
Absolutely.
But it goes beyond just life and death.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, our sources also point to some serious friction when it comes to how we understand the universe and our place in it.
For sure. How about the theory of evolution?
Oh, that's a big one.
It's like a foundational block for modern biology.
The bedrock.
But as our sources point out, some religious fundamentalist groups just flat out reject it.
They're not having it.
Their interpretation of their scriptures leads them to believe in a literal six-day creation,
Okay, so a young Earth.
which clashes head-on with the vast time scale and the gradual processes that we see in evolution.
Right, millions and millions of years versus 6 days.
Exactly.
It's like two totally different origin stories.
Yeah, it's like two different creation myths.
Shaping each group's worldview
Right.
and how they view scientific progress.
Absolutely.
And it gets even more tangled when you bring in transhumanism's goal of not just understanding our brains, but actually enhancing them.
Oh yeah, the brain stuff is where things get really interesting.
A little freaky, maybe.
Our sources talk about this idea of merging with machines,
Cyborgs, here we come.
which freaks some people out, understandably.
Yeah, I can see that.
There are different aspects to this, of
There's
course.
not just one thing.
We've got brain-computer interfaces, which could boost our cognitive abilities.
Like becoming super intelligent.
And then there's the even wilder idea of uploading our consciousness into a digital space.
Hold on. Uploading consciousness, that's straight out of a sci-fi movie.
I know, right? But it's not as far-fetched as it sounds.
Really?
Researchers are actually working on mapping the brain's connections
Wow.
and figuring out if it's even possible to transfer that information to something non-biological.
So a computer, basically.
Yeah, like a supercomputer or some kind of advanced network.
That raises some seriously big questions about what consciousness even is
Huge questions.
and what makes us us.
Questions that religious groups have been wrestling with for centuries.
Right, but now, with this whole technological twist,
Exactly.
it's like transhumanism is forcing us to confront these age-old questions, but in this totally new, mind-bending way.
And with much higher stakes.
No wonder there's so much tension and debate around all this.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
Okay, but before we get too lost in the philosophical weeds here,
Right.
let's zoom in on the specific areas where this tension really explodes.
Good idea.
Our sources highlight 5 key friction points.
Okay, I'm ready.
Number 1 is the outright rejection of certain scientific advancements.
And one really fascinating example from our sources is the Amish community.
The Amish, interesting.
While not all religious fundamentalists share their views, they offer a useful lens for understanding this perspective.
So how do the Amish approach technology?
They're very deliberate. They carefully evaluate each new technology.
They don't just jump on the bandwagon.
Not at all. They consider not just the practical benefits,
Okay.
but also the potential impact on their community, their traditions, their spiritual values.
Makes sense.
And they've made a conscious choice to limit certain technologies.
Like cars and electricity.
Because they believe those things can disrupt social cohesion and lead to a focus on individual pursuits.
Rather than the community's well-being. It's
Exactly.
a really different way of looking at progress.
Yeah, it challenges the assumption that more technology is always better.
It's not just a knee-jerk reaction against science.
Right.
It's a deliberate choice rooted in a specific set of values.
That's about protecting a way of life.
Which brings us to friction point number 2. The clash between absolute claims of truth, often found in religious doctrines, and the constantly evolving nature of scientific understanding.
Right, that's a big one.
It's like 2 different ways of knowing.
And this clash is super evident in the debates around genetic engineering.
Yeah, designer babies and all that.
For example, our sources talk about pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, PGD,
UGD, okay.
which lets parents screen embryos for genetic disorders.
To avoid passing on certain conditions.
Right, and while some people see this as a responsible way to prevent suffering,
Yeah, using science for good.
certain religious groups are strongly opposed to it.
They see it as problematic.
They believe that selecting and discarding embryos violates the sanctity of life.
Okay, so it's about when life begins.
Yeah, they see the embryo as a person from the moment of conception.
So already deserving of protection.
Exactly. And they argue that we shouldn't have the power to choose which lives are worthy.
It's a tough issue, no doubt.
Incredibly complex.
And this isn't about us giving the answers here. It's about understanding the different perspectives
The values and beliefs at play,
and the challenges we face as we navigate this increasingly complicated world.
where science, technology, and faith intersect.
And speaking of challenges, our sources point to this fear of losing our identity as another major friction point.
Right, that existential anxiety.
The idea that transhumanist technologies could radically change our bodies and minds.
Yeah, it sparks this deep-seated fear about what it even means to be human.
Like what makes us us?
Exactly. And would those essential qualities change if we enhance ourselves?
Would we still be human if we could live for centuries or merge our minds with machines?
Or upload our consciousness?
Whoa, yeah, it's getting deep.
These questions cut right to the core of who we are.
Both as individuals and as a species.
And it's completely understandable that these anxieties fuel resistance to transhumanism.
Especially among those who find comfort and meaning in traditional religious frameworks.
It's a reaction to the unknown.
Okay, but let's not forget that this clash also plays out in the realm of ethics. That's friction point number 4.
Oh yeah, the ethical dilemmas are huge.
Bioethics is already a complex field.
For sure.
But transhumanist technologies just add this whole other layer of complexity.
It's like ethics on steroids.
How about a concrete example, something from our sources?
Okay, well, the debate over using CRISPR to edit human embryos is a big one.
That's cutting-edge stuff.
It has the potential to cure genetic diseases.
That's amazing.
But some people fear the unintended consequences of altering the human germline.
Like messing with the very blueprint of humanity.
And religious groups often voice concerns about playing God and disrupting the natural order of creation.
Right, it's that line in the sand.
Yeah, like we're stepping into territory that's not meant for us.
Okay, so we've got this tangled web of ethical dilemmas with no easy solutions.
Yeah, it's not black and white.
And these aren't just theoretical debates either.
They have real-world consequences.
Which brings us to the final friction point, the resistance to transhumanism that's happening through political influence.
Yes, the battle for the future.
We see this playing out in so many ways.
Lobbying efforts to restrict funding for certain types of research.
Attempts to ban specific technologies altogether,
Religious groups are often at the forefront of this.
driven by their ethical and theological concerns.
They're actively trying to shape how these technologies are developed and used.
It's a reminder that this clash of ideologies isn't just happening in academic journals or online forums.
It's happening in the real world right now,
In legislatures, courtrooms, and the court of public opinion.
and the stakes couldn't be higher.
The outcome of these battles will have a profound impact on the future of humanity.
Will we embrace transhumanism's potential?
Or cling to tradition and resist change.
Or is there some middle ground?
Some way to harness this technological power while preserving our values and what it means to be human.
Big questions, no easy answers.
That's what this deep dive is all about.
Exploring the complexity.
And trying to understand this clash from different angles.
It's not about taking sides.
It's about understanding the forces at play.
And the potential consequences of our choices.
So buckle up, folks, because we're just getting started.
Yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
In our next part, we'll delve into the arguments for and against religion's relevance in this age of transhumanism.
A debate that goes straight to the heart of what it means to be human in the 21st century.
It's a conversation you won't want to miss.
So we're back, diving deeper into this fascinating and, let's be honest, sometimes kind of mind-boggling clash between transhumanism and religious fundamentalism.
We've laid out the battlefield, right? We've seen where the sparks fly.
Now it's time to tackle one of the biggest questions this whole thing throws up.
Hit me with it.
Is religion even relevant in this age of, well, radical tech advancements?
Yeah, it's been bugging me ever since our last chat.
It's a big one.
On the one hand, you've got these transhumanists charging ahead, pushing boundaries with tech.
Leaving tradition behind, it seems.
But then on the other hand, religion still gives meaning and purpose to billions of people.
A huge chunk of humanity.
So how do we even begin to square those two things?
Right. It seems like they're coming from totally different planets.
Okay, let's start with the arguments against religion's relevance. Where do our sources kick things off?
Well, one of the main points they bring up is how often religious dogma has actually held back scientific progress throughout history.
Like putting the brakes on discovery.
Exactly, and they point to the Galileo affair as a prime example.
Ah, yeah, Galileo and the whole heliocentric model thing.
The Catholic Church basically condemned him because his ideas contradicted their interpretation of Scripture.
You weren't too happy about it.
Not at all. And that kind of resistance, that clinging to established doctrines, it can stifle scientific inquiry.
And slow down progress.
Exactly.
It's like using an outdated map when the whole world is changing around you.
Great analogy.
But it's not just about these historical examples, right?
Yeah, it's deeper than that.
Our sources also say that the subjective nature of religious beliefs makes it tough to establish a universal ethical framework for all these new transhumanist technologies.
Right. How do you set guidelines for something as radical as changing human nature when beliefs are so personal and varied?
Yeah, it's not like there's a one-size-fits-all answer.
And it varies across cultures and denominations,
So many different interpretations.
which makes it super tricky to find common ground.
Especially for something as potentially game-changing as, say, mind uploading.
Oh, yeah, our sources talk about the soul and its role in all this.
Okay, so the soul, that's a big one.
Some religious perspectives see the soul as separate from the body, eternal.
And others.
They believe it's linked to the physical form.
So that completely changes how you view something like mind uploading or even cryonics.
It's like we're speaking completely different languages.
How can you even have a productive conversation when the basic assumptions about reality are so different?
It's a huge communication barrier.
And then there's the whole issue of priorities.
Yeah, what we value most.
Transhumanists are all about improving this life, right?
Extending it, enhancing it, making the most of our time here.
But many religious perspectives put the emphasis on the afterlife or spiritual salvation.
Two totally different focuses.
It's like one side is saying, hey, let's build a heaven on earth.
And the other is saying, this life is just a temporary stop on the way to something bigger.
I can see how that creates tension, especially when you've got these mind-blowing technologies that could radically change what it means to be human.
Right. It forces us to confront these big existential questions.
What's the purpose of life if death isn't inevitable? What does it mean to be human if we overcome our biological limits?
Heavy stuff.
But hold on, let's not forget that religion also has this amazing ability to bring people together.
Build communities, offer support.
That sense of belonging.
That's a fundamental human need.
And those are all valuable aspects of the human experience that shouldn't be tossed aside.
Agreed. And our sources actually highlight these very points when they present the arguments for engaging with religion, even in this age of transhumanism.
Okay, so what are they saying?
One compelling argument is that religion offers this pre-existing moral framework
Like a foundation to build on.
that we can use to guide the development and application of these new transhumanist technologies.
So instead of starting from scratch,
We can draw on centuries of wisdom
think about concepts like the Golden Rule.
or the emphasis on compassion and empathy found in so many religious traditions.
Those are powerful ideas.
And they could be essential for navigating the ethical minefield that comes with things like enhancing human capabilities or creating artificial intelligence.
It's like tapping into this deep well of ethical guidance that's already there.
Instead of reinventing the wheel.
And it's not just about ethics either, right?
No, there's the community aspect too.
Our sources talk about how important that sense of belonging is, especially when the world is changing so rapidly.
It's like having a safe haven in a storm.
A place to connect with others who share your values.
Religion can offer that.
And that kind of support system can be crucial for navigating the uncertainties and anxieties that come with all these technological advancements.
Absolutely. It's about having a solid foundation when the ground beneath you is shifting.
And it goes beyond just providing comfort,
Religion can also inspire a sense of purpose and meaning.
which could be even more important in a world where technology is reshaping our understanding of what it means to be human.
If transhumanism leads to radical life extension, enhanced abilities, even merging with machines, we're going to need to grapple with some really big existential questions.
The big why are we here
The-
question.
Exactly. And religion, with its long history of exploring these themes.
It could offer some valuable insights. It's like we're on this collective journey of self-discovery.
And religion could be a compass, helping us find our way through the unknown.
But even if we acknowledge religion's potential contributions, there's still this big question of how to bridge the gap between those who see transhumanism as a threat and those who see it as the next step in human evolution.
How do we even start that conversation?
Right, it seems like such a huge divide.
That's where dialogue comes in, a willingness to listen and understand,
Both sides need to hear each other out
to try to grasp the values and motivations behind the other's perspective.
and to acknowledge the valid points each side makes.
It's about finding common ground.
Transhumanists need to be sensitive to the anxieties some people feel about technology disrupting their beliefs.
And religious groups need to be open to the possibility that transhumanism isn't inherently opposed to their faith.
Maybe it could even be a tool to advance some of their goals, like alleviating suffering and creating a better world.
It's about finding that overlap.
It won't be easy.
No, it'll require patience and empathy.
A willingness to step outside our comfort zones.
But the potential rewards are huge,
If we can learn to talk to each other respectfully,
even when we disagree.
we might just find a way to navigate this whole thing together.
Creating a future that benefits everyone.
That's a future worth fighting for.
Absolutely. But let's be real, it's not all going to be sunshine and rainbows.
Right. There are some serious risks and challenges with transhumanism.
Even if we set aside the religious objections.
In our next part, we're going to explore those potential downsides.
The ethical dilemmas, the social implications, the unintended consequences.
We need to look at those carefully before we jump headfirst into this brave new world.
It's a crucial part of the conversation.
You definitely won't want to miss it. Okay, so we've done a lot of heady thinking, but it's time to get real to see how this clash between transhumanism and religious fundamentalism is actually playing out in the world.
It's not just an abstract debate, it's impacting decisions being made right now.
We've talked philosophy, explored viewpoints, but let's look at some concrete examples from our sources that really bring this conflict into focus.
Where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
Exactly. So where do we see this tension playing out most intensely?
Well, bioethics is definitely a hotbed of controversy, especially when it comes to genetic engineering.
Yeah, CRISPR, designer babies, that whole Pandora's box.
CRISPR technology is incredibly powerful. It allows for precise gene editing, which has amazing potential for curing diseases.
But it also raises some serious ethical questions.
Especially for those with deep religious convictions.
We touched on this earlier, but let's go deeper into a specific case study from our sources.
Okay.
What about that example with the couple who want to use CRISPR to make sure their child is born with a gene that's linked to increased muscle mass?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
They believe it'll give their kid a leg up in life, maybe even open doors to athletic scholarships or a military career.
Transhumanists might see this as a responsible use of technology.
Improving human potential.
But religious groups often push back hard.
They're worried about playing God, creating a society where people are engineered for specific traits.
It raises concerns about exacerbating existing inequalities.
Yeah, a world where the wealthy can design their perfect offspring while everyone else is left behind.
It's a slippery slope, no doubt.
Where do we draw the line between therapy and enhancement?
And who decides what an improvement even is?
It's easy to see how this tech could be misused, leading to some pretty dystopian outcomes.
We need to proceed with extreme caution.
It's a minefield of ethical dilemmas.
Absolutely.
And we need to have these conversations involve diverse voices, including religious perspectives.
Because these aren't just scientific questions, they're moral and societal questions.
Okay, let's shift gears from the lab to the political arena.
Where the battle for the future is being fought.
Our sources also highlight how this clash is playing out in attempts to regulate or even ban certain transhumanist technologies.
It's the battle of ideas, but with real-world consequences.
How about a specific example?
Well, there's the whole debate around cognitive enhancement drugs or nootropics.
Yeah, I've heard of those are like brain boosters, right?
Basically, they're becoming increasingly popular, people using them to improve focus, productivity.
Students, professionals, anyone who wants to get ahead.
Some see it as harmless,
Just another tool to enhance performance.
but others worry about potential side effects.
And the pressure it creates for people to enhance themselves just to compete.
It's a kind of arms race.
And religious groups often raise concerns about these drugs altering our natural mental state.
Interfering with spiritual practices, that sort of thing.
It's interesting how often this idea of naturalness comes up.
Right. What does it even mean to be natural
Mm.
when tech is so intertwined with our lives?
And who gets to decide what's natural and what's not? It's a blurry line.
It's a question without easy answers.
We're in uncharted territory here, with those lines blurring between human and machine, therapy and enhancement.
The natural and the artificial. It's all
Yeah.
getting mixed up.
And we can't ignore those questions. They're central to this whole debate.
And we need diverse perspectives, including those informed by religious beliefs, to help us grapple with them.
Okay, so we've looked at bioethics, we've talked about political battles, but there's another frontier where this tension is exploding, and it's probably the most mind-boggling of them all.
Artificial intelligence, I bet.
You got it, AI?
It's both exhilarating and terrifying, this idea of creating machines that can think.
And religious groups are definitely paying attention.
What do our sources say about their concerns?
Well, one big worry is the potential for AI to replace human workers, leading to massive unemployment.
Yeah, that's a common fear, robots taking our jobs.
And not just blue-collar jobs either.
AI is becoming incredibly sophisticated.
It could impact white-collar professions too.
Doctors, lawyers, even programmers.
Imagine a world where algorithms can do most jobs more efficiently, cheaper than humans.
It raises questions about the future of work, how we distribute wealth.
And even the purpose of human existence if our labor is no longer needed.
Some religious groups worry about a loss of human dignity, a sense of meaninglessness.
Potentially eroding the very fabric of society and faith.
It's a dystopian vision that's often explored in sci-fi, but it's not entirely far-fetched.
And it's not just about job displacement either, right?
No, there are ethical concerns about creating machines that can think, learn, potentially even surpass human intelligence.
What happens when our creations become smarter than us?
It's the stuff of nightmares for some.
Our sources talk about artificial general intelligence, or AGI.
AI systems with human-level or even superhuman cognitive abilities.
That's a whole other ball game.
It raises profound questions about consciousness, moral responsibility.
The potential for AI to pose a threat to humanity.
Some religious groups see this as the ultimate act of hubris, trying to play God.
To usurp the role of creator.
They're worried we might unleash forces we can't control.
Leading to our own destruction.
It's a sobering thought.
We need to be having these conversations now, before it's too late.
To consider the ethical implications, the potential risks, the safeguards we need.
And we need to do it in a way that includes diverse perspectives, including religious voices.
It's not just a technical challenge, it's a moral and spiritual one.
Wow, this deep dive has been intense. A whirlwind tour of a complex and rapidly changing landscape.
We've covered a lot of ground.
The philosophical clash, the friction points, the real-world implications in bioethics, politics, AI.
It's a lot to process.
But hopefully you've come away with a deeper understanding of what's at stake here.
And the importance of engaging in thoughtful, respectful dialogue.
The future is unwritten, and how these two powerful forces interact will shape the very trajectory of humanity.
It's a future we all have a role in shaping,
A future that demands our attention, our critical thinking.
and our willingness to bridge divides, find common ground.
So stay curious, stay engaged, keep asking the tough questions because the future depends on it.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.